Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Hi, Personality Hacker. This is Matthew. And I was wondering how a type might show up if one of their first or second functions wasn't allowed to develop properly because of upbringing, and how that instead some of their functions not in the car model a little more developed. I was wondering, really appreciate your opinion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for the question. Our colleague, Dr. Dario Nardi, he does brain scanning research around personality types and cognitive functions, and he has been using EEG machines to see which brain waves show up on the machine based on different modalities of behaving that put people into the different cognitive functions. And based on his research, he said that the biggest indicator of how personality types develop up until about the age of 25 is gender. And then after the age of 25, based on his research, the biggest mark of how people's personalities develop is their career choice. So based on that, that's just a general statement. There is some flexibility in how our personality types develop based on not just the nature of how we were born and, the initial circumstances, but there seems to be some indications that nurture, the way we're raised, the type of career choice we pick, the way we have to use our personality in our lives shapes which parts of the functions get developed. And in fact, sometimes functions that are not even in our stack or car model can be developed over time based on what we're forced to use.
No, that's not to say that it will dictate our personality type, like our how we experience our environment and how we're influenced by it. It does it more indicates development, but it doesn't determine the personality type. We come pre-wired with our personality type. So your question is, considering that there is some flexibility here, based on what Joel just mentioned, what happens if you're raised in a context that doesn't let you develop your dominant or auxiliary, what we call the driver and the co-pilot function? And in fact, what if our context requires from us really, it's kind of a big ask to develop functions that are outside of our stack or our car model. And there's a couple different things or different ways that you can look at it. The first one is that we are always going to be seeking opportunities to use and, in fact, exercise that driver and co-pilot. I'm just going to use the car model for the rest of this 10-minute type advice so that I don't have to use double language and take up time. So our driver and co-pilot functions, we're always looking for opportunities to use those. And if we're raised in a situation that punishes us for using them or is constantly frustrating the attempts that we make to use those functions or to have wins, then we're going to have a sense of not being ourselves. It's going to feel like dysthymia, right? That like sort of low-grade depression that makes you feel a little off. You never really feel like you have the energy to do anything. You lack motivation. You just kind of feel blah all the time. And part of the reason why is being in your driver and co-pilot gives us extra energy. It's like it's our energy packs. It's our energy source to be in those functions. Not only that, but we get chemically rewarded when we are using those functions as well. As we did a podcast with our friend Dr. Denise Cook, who is a neuroscientist, and she studies cognitive functions and our relationship to these functions and how our brain responds to them. And I said, is it accurate to say that our minds or our brains, not minds, but our brains give us a little chemical reward, like a little cocktail of chemicals that reward us when we're using these functions? And she's like, yeah, basically. So even if that's not empirically true, it's functionally true. And if we are always seeking these reward mechanisms for using these functions, but we're never allowed them, it's denied or withheld repeatedly, then we're going to show up as all people show up when they're denied their positive chemicals. We're going to show up a little depressed. We're going to show up as not ourselves. So what happens when we are not able to develop those functions? Well, we lack a sense of self. We lack individuation. We lack the happy chemicals that come along with feeling that we're our best selves or we're heading in that direction. So that's one way to look at it, particularly if we are not just then shoved into like the 10-year-old and 3-year-old, because some people have an experience where they're denied access to the driver and co-pilot, but they're expected to perform with their 10-year-old and 3-year-old. In some cases, that can actually have a sort of counterintuitive positive effect of ensuring the person is not one-sided. It makes sure that they're in context where they're integrating those parts of who they are. And you don't want too much of it, because that will create, phenomena like we talk about with loops, or phenomena like we talk about with grips. But if it's not too severe, it can actually be healthy, particularly if the person's work now as an adult is to get into their driver and co-pilot, which is fantastic work. It's super fun, and it's actually kind of a nice developmental path. A little frustrating, but a decent path. However, if you're not even allowed that, you're forced to be in what John Beebe would call your shadow functions. You're forced to be in the functions that are not native to you at all. I would imagine that the person would have a very hard time finding first of all, their typological home, right? They're like always seeking a sense of home and a personality type that fits. And I would imagine everything would feel like it doesn't fit. Every description would be not quite them. Everything would feel like it's a little off. And so they would really struggle to find a home, I would imagine. But the other thing is that that person's always out of their sandbox. They're always playing other people's games. They're always playing with a handicap and a disadvantage. So even if they get good at developing, let's pretend their 5th and 6th function, which are very accessible to us, it just always feels a little off. We might even be a person who's a bit caustic, because we're in a space where we're using functions that are usually assigned to the resources we pull on when we believe that we are defensive, resources we're pulling on when we believe we're in a bad situation. That's why they're called the shadow functions. We're pulling on them so often that we might turn into a person who is expected to have a caustic frame, or feels like they're always having to fight the environment. And to some extent, that's accurate. That's true. So a person who is denied their driver and co-pilot and forced to be in their 5th through 8th function is not in an enviable position at all. They really would struggle, I would imagine, with identity, finding themselves, feeling a sense of friendliness in the world, and they might be both depressed and a little, what's the word? The opposite of the world is friendly? Hostile. They might feel like things are a little hostile. So obviously the key is, as soon as you find out what your driver and co-pilot are, create an ergonomic environment to be in those functions as often as possible. Get all of those hits, those chemical hits that are owed to you by being in your best functions, and start to individuate, start to discover who you are through these functions that are native to you, that you are a steward of the parts of the world that these functions represent, and push through what might be a habituated viewpoint of life, that nothing's going to turn out, there's no reason for motivation, nothing's ever good. Push through all of that to the other side, where you get to find yourself. You get to discover who you are. You get to have a roadmap for, discovering what's the best of you and why you're here, and maybe what your message is, and maybe even your purpose or mission. And it doesn't even have to be that big, just who you are supposed to be as you show up in day-to-day life. So while the situation isn't enviable, the work, again, you have to fight against all those muscles that have, sort of formed around the unaligned spine, right? All those muscles are going to, after you go to the chiropractor and you get aligned, all those muscles are trying to pull you back out of it. You got to fight through that. And particularly with your lifestyle, which might constantly and perpetually try to push you back into those non-preferred functions. But if you can fight through that portion on the other side, oh, it's so liberating. It's so beautiful. So while the person might not be in an enviable spot, the growth work they have to do on the other side is quite enviable.
Thank you, Matthew, for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.